Bet you thought you'd never see this again. And for those of you that are here on Patreon or just jumped on to see if I was really bullshitting, no, this is not a joke. Heyo people, and welcome back to another edition of Fimi, or we are officially back on our bullshit. For those of you that don't know, Fimi was our old quarterly series where we'd rapid fire review a handful of releases I never got the chance to review throughout the year, but it kind of went away when me brain broke last year. Oh yeah, because I'm totally sane these days. But to those of you that have been here before, y'all know the drill. It's basically the same show, except from here on in, I'm not taking requests anymore. Honestly, more than anything, it was that. It was kind of driving me crazy. I was doing way too many of those, and the episodes were way too big in general. I have about 29 records to talk about in this vid. The full list is going to be in the comments down below if you want to follow along. Let's not waste any more time and get started with Nicole Dollanganger, or Ganger, however you're supposed to say it, was actually an artist I picked up on from following Backwash on Twitter. Seriously, I get fire recommendations out of her. 10 out of 10 would recommend. And I will say this was definitely an interesting as hell listen. Spooky, sparse, atmospheric as all hell. The lingering dread that hangs in the air throughout this whole record is just like palpable. You could drink this stuff in. It's like if Tammy Wynette were channeling Grimes and just like raw fucking depression. I will admit, I did have a little bit of trouble adjusting to her voice. I mentioned Grimes earlier and like, but I could swear wow, yeah, she really reminds me of Grimes. Wow, this woman is on chipmunk mode. But you know, that is also part of the appeal of this music here. Her voice adds this sort of inhuman, almost uncanny valley sort of affectation to it. Her singing style adds to the creepy, tragic, horrifyingly depressing effect by leaps and bounds. If you can get down with it, this is a hell of an interesting ride. And y'all, when I say depressing, I am not kidding here. Lyrically, this album is like nuclear sad. Same level as like Ethel Cain or Lingua Ignota, though perhaps not nearly as complex. While her songwriting and storytelling is very gripping, it is a bit kind of standard. It feels very weepy country. Again, think like Tammy Wynette or Hank Williams' most sad songs. It has that kind of vibe. This album is basically just Jolene holding a toaster over her bathwater. I wouldn't say this is on the level of a Lingua or an Ethel, but if this is your general vibe, yeah, go for it. Some good depression. Another pleasant surprise from super early in the year, emo, punk-adjacent rock with a kind of distinctive math rocky sort of edge. Not bad at all construction-wise, very intense and clean guitar work, lots of dissident and crazy chord works and noodling. Their singer is, 16, 17, 18, 19. Kinda yelpy, but not in an unappealing way necessarily. Just again, rough around the edges. I think that's how I'd probably describe this entire record. The lyrics definitely follow that whole sort of venting about the real exhaustion and emotional heaviness I'm going through, but at the same time, all the song titles are just like ironic shitposts. I mean, if you've listened to like Spanish love songs or Cliff Diver, you kind of know what their whole deal is. Honestly, you know who these guys really remind me of, and this reference might sting a little bit. They kind of sound like Remo Drive back when they didn't suck. Again, it's another one of those albums where the rough mix definitely kind of hurts it, but there's absolutely talent roiling under the surface, and I did have a solid, fun time with this album. It's very short, like not even 20 minutes, it's practically an EP, but I like that it doesn't dawdle, doesn't fuck around, doesn't waste your time. Albums like this don't need to be crazy long. They stick around for about as long as they need to, and they stick the landing and make a decent first impression. There's room for improvement, sure, but absolutely there's potential here. If you're into early 20s emo or like lo-fi sounding pop punk, that kind of Bandcamp-ass punk scene, it's worth a listen. Maybe not album of the year material for me, but solid. Early January was kind of a doldrums, as it most often is, so it gave me a lot of time to check out other recommendations from stuff I'd been hearing buzz about, or from folks in the Patreon server. A server peep actually dropped this recommendation into the chat randomly. Thanks again for the rec, Lilith. I hope you don't mind me stealing your stuff. But this is an Italian cold wave, dark wave kind of project that's been going since about 2019, as far as I can tell. Very smooth, very pretty, extremely mellow goth pop. Bright and sparky synth work, dull, thudding bass lines, very airy in a lot of places, but melody rich, and when they want to be, they can be very infectious with certain grooves or certain hooks. It does have that ability to get your toe tapping. But again, I'd say the production definitely holds this one back. It's pretty bare bones on this release. I honestly can't quite put my finger on it, but the way the synths and vocals are layered make everything sound kinda generic and stock. The drums and percussion really lack a lot of necessary punch, and the vocals could definitely be mixed a lot better. They are way too front-facing in the mix, and their singing isn't necessarily fantastic either. This kind of stuff doesn't necessarily command much of a vocal performance, but I'd be lying if I didn't say their voices, both of them, were a little stiff. I mean, overall, the music is very pretty, and it's very well constructed, but man, again, the mix leaves a lot to be desired on this one. And for poppy or goth like this, production is one of the key things you really gotta nail, because when you don't, ooh, some of the flaws in your songwriting and performance can really stand out that much more. Good production on a goth pop record can really help paper over a lot of mistakes here and there. Not a bad record by any means. I did have fun with this one, but it feels, honestly, for a band that's been going as long as they have, a wee bit amateurish. Not without charm, especially if you like the beepy boopy flavor of synth-heavy goth music. It's a little droll and a little sleepy in places. This isn't probably the first thing I'd recommend you listen to if you want to get into this genre. Probably not an album of the year contender, but hey, if you're looking for more spoopy synth pop, again, another good one to potentially try and check out. I swear to God, every time July Talk puts something out, I'm like, July Talk, who are they? I remember this band, don't I? Who the hell are these guys? And eventually I look them up and it's like, Picture in Love! Oh, you're those guys! Oh yeah, y'all are great. Why do I keep forgetting you exist? But yeah, July Talk, they make pretty decent music. It's very driving and very energetic rock. Though this album, compared to a lot of the other stuff I've heard from them, actually feels a bit more kind of sparse. It feels like they're moving in a more indie, more low-key kind of direction. I'd say this is them trying to put on their Interpol or their placebo face. The band's main gimmick is their two lead singers. Leia Faye has a pleasant, high-pitched soprano, while Peter Dreymanis is this ultra-low, grizzly gravel, just fucking shake it. And on this record, there's nice chemistry between them and good chemistry between the instrumentation as well. It feels like a more organic version of a Silver Sun Pickups record. Lots of driving melodies, lots of repetitive choruses, lots of punching, steady beats. Everything has presence, but nothing overshadows anything else too much. It is a very well mixed and well balanced feeling kind of sound. It's also a pretty lean and mean 40 minutes too. It doesn't waste much time, but it doesn't go too crazy either. Some of the slower songs like Repeat and Raw were a bit on the dozy side if I'm being honest. Again, they're leaning more towards indie rock on this direction, but I feel like that direction may be a little too low energy for them. Again, they don't butcher anything, but when they do have to slow things down, I feel like the album slows down a little too much. Again, this band works best when they're fucking... I'm tired of picturing love. On On those moments where they're not, the album does admittedly lose me. But despite that, I don't have too many other complaints. It's a nice bit of experimentation for them, and an overall solid little rock record. Maybe I'll actually remember who they are next time they drop something. Whew, I mean, this is hot shit right now, isn't it? I mean, the thing is, I get it. Clearly, this is not music made for motherfuckers like me. Lame white motherfucker is not on the list of folks she's trying to appeal to. I get that. And as a result, I've seen a lot of critical hostility towards her music. Again, a lot of us are lame white motherfuckers. That having been said, though, I do honestly see her appeal. Her flow is good. I don't completely dislike her lyrics. This is music for the baddies, you know? This is music for the girls. This is music for the badass bitches who are out to just steal the fucking night away and take your fucking man. And for that, yeah, I get it. I've been known to take a few mans here and there, so like, yeah, I get it. I mean, it absolutely is one of those records it's not for everybody, but I absolutely admired how much confidence Ice Spice has without coming off as too obnoxious. Like, again, her flows and her beat choices are pretty decent. So it's like she's flexing, but I mean, she's putting forth valid receipts on a lot of those flexes. So I'm not immediately turned off by this. Again, it's a baddie vibes kind of record. So yeah, I get why this would appeal to the baddies. I've seen plenty of people out there try to appeal to the baddies and fucking fail. My only real issue with Ice Spice comes from her vocal cadence. Her voice is really breathy and really relaxed, maybe a bit too breathy and relaxed. You know, for something that goes this hard, I wouldn't mind a bit more like oomph and bravado, like you're saying baddie shit, you know? You don't have to whisper like you're in your mom's basement. That and the fact that this project is crazy short. It is just an EP, but even for an EP, it's pretty bare bones. It's almost more of a proof of concept than an actual record, but looking at it in those terms, yeah, I'd say there's definitely potential here. Get her in the right environment, working with the right people, polish out a few of her rough spots, teach her how to speak up a little bit. I could see her doing bigger and better things. I mean, maybe she won't be the next Meg or the next Nicki or anything, but I don't, there is talent there. Again, more of a proof of concept than an actual album or anything, but as a proof of concept, I get it. I don't know. We'll see what happens with her. Okay, so here we go. Sam Smith was one of the first big major releases of the year. At least one of the first ones we were expecting to be a big deal. Especially with that last single they dropped. They were signaling a major shift in sound, and Unholy ruled the charts in the back half of 2022. So now we're gonna see a more sexually charged, a more dangerous, a more deviant Sam Smith. My response to hearing all of that is, that's it. I mean, granted, I gotta be real, I never fucked with Sam Smith to begin with. I never hated them by any means, I just found them to be really tepid and boring and lame. Y'all, I'm sorry, Sam Smith is ultra lame. They make music to play over the loudspeakers while your mom is in a perfume shop. And even though the singles to this thing were trying to signal something much more explicit, y'all, it's not here. It's the same timid, weepy, overwrought Sam Smith we've all heard 1,000 times before. It basically just sounds like their team hired a handful of producers and collaborators to try and put this sex kitten mask on them, but I can see right through it. It's very bland, very milquetoast. I mean, your results may vary, sure, but to me, this album is an Easter egg. Trying to show off color and of sort of garishness on the outside, but inside, it's the same boring white shelled bit of protein. This thing was just impressively boring to me, and made even more weird by the fact that the singles sound absolutely nothing like it. They sound like alien tracks, written for an entirely different artist, for an entirely different record. I mean, I admit I didn't despise it, and Sam Smith is one of those artists I've just never gotten down with, but like, it's a very boring Sam Smith record that happens to have a few weirdly controversial songs on it. Like, I don't know, listening to this, all I can say is y'all had your moral outrage panic over this. This was the thing that got some of y'all's panties in a twist. Y'all seriously need to buy stronger fucking panties. Holy shit, grow up. You know, Ava Max is one of those artists I wish I liked more. I feel like I should like her more. She's very bombastic and a very proficient pop singer. She's absolutely not untalented, and I've never had an outright bad time with anything she's put out. But on this record, more than a lot of others, I just can't help but feel like this is... we have Lady Gaga at home. Does that make sense? She can perform, sure, but she never has any really creative lyrics or original ideas to help her stand out from a lot of the other people in her field. I always have a decent time listening to her music. Every single note of it just falls out of my head the minute I'm done listening to it, and none of it ever sticks. My brain refuses to hold on to any of this material. It's a decent bit of junk food dance pop. It's good for that, credit where it's due. And I can't say it's not like pretentious or incoherent or incompetent or anything necessarily. It's just, I'm sorry, but I fail to understand why you would listen to Ava Max over most other pop starlets, really. Maybe I just don't get it. Maybe she's just not for me. But this is an artist who I feel like I should get. I absolutely should love. But it never really clicks. It's a shame that it doesn't, because it's not like she's untalented. She just doesn't do anything particularly better than other people I've heard out there. She's not bad, and if you're looking for more dance pop in your life, you could certainly do way worse than this. But is she worth throwing out your Dua Lipa or your Rina Sawayama records? Nah. She's fine, I guess, but I don't have much to say. So this was another record I picked up just out of random curiosity for the early year doldrums, and I heard other folks talking about this record. I'm not immediately familiar with these guys, so I figured I'd check it out, and again, I don't hate this, but I do feel like I really just don't get it. Young Fathers are a band that really don't fit into any one genre. There's a lot of lo-fi indie instrumentation in there, but also a lot of African-sounding beats. There's a big world music kind of vibe to a lot of this stuff. But there's also bits of like Southern gospel and blues and like punk in there too. I don't know, they're one of those bands, they're just a little bit of everything. And I don't know if they do any of those particular sounds they're trying particularly well. I did want to like this one more than I did, but I just couldn't vibe with it. It's just way too repetitive for my taste. A lot of the songs on this thing tend to focus on one hook or one beat or one melody and just drive it, repeat it over and over again. They drive it into the ground. When they do find a good hook or a good melody to latch a song to, it does come off as okay. It's not unlistenable by any means, and I do understand the appeal. It's a little much for me. I could not vibe into it. A lot of the times when listening to songs off of this record, 2 or 3 minutes in, I'm like, okay, I get it. Is the song over yet? And then there's 2 or 3 more minutes left, and I'm like, okay, whenever you're ready to finish up, Junior. Like I mentioned up top, though, this was a first try for me. It's entirely possible I don't get them, or this isn't a good record to serve as an ambassador. Maybe take my opinion with a huge grain of salt on this one. I do see why people are into this, and if you were vibing on this, hey, Godspeed, more power to you. Maybe it'll grow on me throughout the year. Again, I don't entirely hate this thing, but again, it's just so repetitive, and it's just so ad nauseum. Whew, y'all. Have you ever been in a breakup? Like a bad breakup? Like, did he just absolutely step all over your ass and not in the kinky fun way? If so, then this is your album, honey. Oh my goodness. And it's not just a breakup record. It's honestly a pretty blunt and honest portrayal of how abusive and shitty men take advantage of women and the things that gals just have to do to fucking cope with it all. Hey, Faye's ability to just lay it all out there and personalize it and make it feel very real. Ugh. Man, she's got a real talent for that, and God, it hurts. I mean, I date men too sometimes. I know, we're trash. And Faye is a fantastic singer with a huge amount of vocal range. And she can even bust out verses as well when she tries to rhyme and rap and whatnot. She is a very talented performer in many different aspects. And for as painful as some of these stories are to tell, her lyrics and overall songwriting skills make them feel very heartfelt and insanely sincere. I mean, the album isn't just exclusively about abusive relationships and stuff like that, but when it is absolutely devastating. Like, if you ain't shedding tears by the end of Ice Cream Man, I don't think you got a heart to break, dude. Just keep in mind that this is not exactly a sunshiny listen, but if you're going through it, and I mean really going through it, then this record will definitely feel relatable. And she's an extremely talented musician who puts forth a very banging performance. If you dig other hip-hop and R&B artists like Lil Sims, No Name, Arlo Parks, and the like, yeah, add this to your rotation too. Very, very solid stuff, even if, you know, fucking ow. So I literally wrote an entire single album review script for this one back when it dropped. Just didn't have time to shoot it. Paramore also dropped that same week, so you know where I'm at there. But you know, I gotta admit, I'm a big fan of the whole reinvention that Rebecca Black has gone through over the past few years, rising out of the ashes of being a worldwide punchline into owning her own identity and breaking the shackles of memedom. Now that she finally has full control of her image and is allowed to make music like a serious, actual musician, how does she do? Honestly, pretty good. Not great, I'd say, but still very impressive. For one, her voice has gotten dramatically better. I mean, Friday. Obviously. But honestly, she's at her best on this outing when she's being whispery or sultry. She's great at being like sexy and seductive. It's a moody record, both lyrically and sonically, but it's also forceful and impactful. You can tell Rebecca is trying to make a statement with this one, to burn off the ridiculousness and let folks know that she is a serious artist that also isn't afraid to have a little fun, but is still meant to be respected and taken seriously. You know, I'd say she does a decent enough job at it, too. The production on this one is very interesting, I'll definitely say that. Lots of choppy staccato beats, lots of vocal distortion. At its core, it's a pop record. But there are hyperpop elements in there. It's not hyperpop, but there's hyperpop trying to nose its way in there. It kind of feels like that Charlie XCX Crash middle ground, where the hyperpop is definitely there, but at its core, it is just trying to have fun and be a fun little danceable pop record. This is actually more what I was kind of hoping that last Tegan and Sara album would turn out to be. I'd just say this works much better. I also love how unapologetically queer the record is, and how most of it is just about the heartache you go through in queer relationships when a girl just destroys your heart. Really, the only thing I didn't necessarily care for on this one was a handful of the lyrical themes she tackles. There are a few tracks on here that, while she never full-blown spells it out, you can tell they're about the stuff she had to go through when Friday was ruining her life. It's not like she hasn't earned the right to vent about that a little bit, I understand, but I feel like she's already proven herself, and she's already moved past that stage. She doesn't need to reference this battle anymore. She already won the fucking war. I feel like the album would be better if she just pretended Friday didn't exist. Moments like that took me out of the record occasionally, but other than that, I'd say this is a solid enough first impression. It's not Charlie, it's not Gaga, but I feel like Rebecca's proven she's worthy of a legitimate spot in the pop music sphere. I feel like she has the potential to be really, really great. She isn't quite there yet, but it's good to see that her genuine talent is finally getting recognized and that she's been able to grow and develop and survive all of that shit. I'm in Rebecca's corner. I'm rooting for her on this. Even if this wasn't my favorite pop album of the year, good on you, Bex. Here's hoping you do better in the future. I will say, it's the best In Flames record I've heard in years. I mean, it sure beats the hell out of the mush-mixed banality of Siren Charms or Battles, and it's definitely not whatever the hell that was supposed to be. There is a bit more of a return to their mellow death roots on this one, and there were a handful of solid, listenable tracks here. I'll give them credit where it's due. It is a step up, but it's not much of one. Honestly, it still suffers from a lot of the tired tropes that they've been unable to entangle themselves from over the past few years. This insipid, pretentious songwriting style, the been there, done that with their riffs and solos, the inability to let go of the pop hooks, which I'm not against necessarily, but they just don't fit into In Flames' sound, and they will not let go of them. I like that they're getting a little better, but they still aren't there yet. It sounds more like they moved on from being the terrible new In Flames that we know now to the terrible In Flames we knew back when they were doing Sense of Purpose or Playground Fading. Sure, it's an improvement, but that's not the kind of back to the old days mentality I was kind of hoping to see here. In Flames is like Block Party to me at this point. They're just one of those bands where I know we can never go home again. And honestly, I should probably just be thankful this album is as good as it is, because Lord knows they can do so much worse. It's okay, I suppose. It's been a long time since an In Flames album didn't outright disappoint the shit out of me. It's still not very good. I'll probably never come back to this again. I don't know, maybe we can at least keep it off the worst list this year. Honestly, if this is one of the worst records I hear all year, I'll consider myself pretty lucky. How about that? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so being the Slater-Kinney mark that I am, I knew I was going to have to talk about this at some point. This is a band featuring Janet Weiss. Yeah, Slater-Kinney's former drummer. Actually, this project long predates her work with Slater-Kinney. Janet and ex-husband Sam Coombs have been doing Quasi on and off since 1990. So what is Quasi? It's fun. I don't have much more to say than that. It's a loud as hell indie rock noise jammer with these blaring, honking ass synths. Janet's typically huge playing style is in there too. And this snide, jokey Gen X style of cynical humor that's like 2 parts Beavis and Butthead and 2 parts Norm Macdonald's Weekend Update. And if I'm being honest, I never really followed Quasi all that closely. But there's not much to follow. Quasi just kind of is what it is. If you like those alternative bands from the 90s that were just like extra loud, like purposefully loud, stuff like Dinosaur Jr. or Pavement or anything Stephen Malkmus got his hands on, yeah, you'll probably dig this. I'd say this is worth a listen. It is basically just another Quasi record. They've barely budged an inch in the 10 years since their last record, but Quasi is one of those bands. They don't have to change. They know who they are. They know what they're out here trying to do. And to their credit, they do an effective as hell job of doing it. And I respect that. If you want a nice little time machine to transport you back to 1995, this will do the trick pretty well. Not an innovative release by any means, but hey, it's a lot of fun, and sometimes that's enough. Ooh, yes, y'all. Ooh, I liked this. I really, really liked this. Bleepy, bloopy, instantly infectious, and insanely danceable dark synthwave. Absolutely gorgeous melodies, outstanding production for a project that's as underground as this, and a record that I just cannot stop spinning. Seriously, I loved this damn thing. Y'all know I'm a huge sucker for pretty, dancey, spooky, and at least mildly slutty goth pop, and this absolutely is that. I fuck so hard with this, y'all. For bands of other artists like this I've recommended, like Choir Boy, Drab Majesty, Soft Kill, House of Harm, get this too. Get this too, y'all. It's smooth, it's silky, it's dark, it's moody, it's bleak, but seductively bouncy and fun. Just like, I'm just gonna have to button my lip until the best of the year list when this inevitably shows up, because man, y'all, I could go on and on about this thing. Oh, I loved it. You see this on a record store shelf, you snatch that bitch. I wish this album gave me more to talk about. I don't necessarily hate it, but in going over my notes on the track by track stuff, most of what I have is just, yeah, it's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Sure, that's fine. Nice feature. Nice feature. Nice feature. God, as many times as critics have had to say that about a Gorillaz record, they should just call their next album that. Nice feature. It's not bad, I suppose. It's a very chill record. There are a few decent melodies, and it's all mixed and mastered very well. But like, y'all, for an album that's supposed to be about a group of competing super cults trying to outdo each other, or whatever the fuck that freaking wiki was going on about, I can't help but feel like this thing should have more meat on its bones. Actually, if I have one note on this thing that sticks out from all the others, it's that Alburn just sounds like he's on autopilot for this one. And honestly, you can tell by a lot of the featured tracks here. In my opinion, any good Gorillaz album takes all of the features they employ and makes them feel like a part of the Gorillaz' original sound or universe. They make it feel like it's supposed to be originally Gorillaz. Bad Gorillaz albums, it just feels like, oh, we got a bunch of other artists to write our songs for us. And this definitely feels like the latter. The Bad Bunny feature just feels like a Bad Bunny song. The Tame Impala feature just feels like a Tame Impala song. They hired Stevie goddamn Nicks to be one of the main singles off of this record, and she's basically just a background singer. I wouldn't say it's outright bad, but there's very little I even remember from this record. I probably haven't spun it since the week it came out, and I've had absolutely no desire to go back to it. I don't know, maybe if you're more of a hardcore Gorillaz fan, you'll get more out of this than I did. And I wouldn't say it's even their worst record, but really, I can only recommend it to Gorillaz hardcore fans. This will probably satiate that crowd, but those of us that are just casual, you can skip it if you want. Don't worry, you didn't miss much. Y'all, another record I just absolutely fucked with this year. Another banging as hell 80s synth pop throwback. This one, though, the vibes are much more stiff and tight and controlled. Think more Kraftwerk or Devo, that cold electro pop vibe. There's also a lot of fluidity and rhythm that harkens more back to the Duran Duran or New Order style of synth pop. Their vocalist absolutely reminds me of Simon Le Bon. Like, if you fuck with Duran Duran, I definitely recommend checking this out. Though again, it's not quite as loose or freewheeling as some of those artists are. This one definitely feels much more tight, much more structured. This is honestly my first go around with them, and it looks like they've been at it since about 2016. I dug into their earlier back catalog a bit, and it looks like they used to be much more of a dark wave band. A lot of their earlier stuff is much more brooding and scary. They used to ape more from like Bauhaus or very early Ministry. It looks like they've made a bit of a shift on their 2021 album, Landslide, and this record is a development on that brighter, sunnier, poppier style of sound. And honestly, yeah, it fits them. This works very, very well. I loved this. Again, it is very, very 80s sounding, and I know a lot of folks are probably getting sick of 80s nostalgia at this point, but it is very catchy, very danceable, and very fun for what it is. Nuovo Testamento, a band we'll be talking about a little later here, absolutely put me in the vibe for this kind of music, and I'm happy to find the good stuff wherever I can find it. So yeah, it's a great little record, definitely worth checking out if you're into synth pop. I'd also check out their back catalog too, lots of good stuff in there. Oh, I know. Don't look at me like that. Let me explain. This year, as I'm sure you've probably noticed, I've been focusing on working in a style that just works better for me, a style that's much healthier for me. I just have not been wasting my time with stuff that I know is going to suck. Simple as that. It's good for me, good for you, doesn't hurt anybody across the board. So why even bother? Well, they said that this is going to be their last full record of original material. They're not retiring from the road, but after this album, they're not putting out any new music, and they're just gonna play the hits. To which my first comment there is, you're Godsmack, what hits? But you know, since it is their final go-around, their last full record, their big final hurrah, let's give it a chance, see if they have the sense to at least close things out strong, since this is going to be the last thing we hear from them. The only colors that stand true are the red, white, blue. No, don't worry, you didn't miss a goddamn thing. This is the same old tired and cumbersome rock radio, middle-aged fart dad BS they've been putting out for the last 2 decades now. It's generic fart dad crap made for fart dad rock radio. Fart dad bullshit on your fart dad speakers with your fart dad. Are you a fart dad? Are you a fart dad? Did you buy a Harley Davidson the nanosecond you turned 40? Did you put up a paper sign in your restaurant window saying, Gen Z's entitled, win? Well then sure, this is probably your jam, you fart dad middle-aged male Karen motherfucker. But for those of us who ain't fucking fart dads, yeah, obvious pass, don't waste your fucking time. One of the most telling things about this record was in interviews, Sully all but said he had no ideas and didn't have anything to write about when trying to make this record. Yeah, mate, it fucking shows. A very 70s pop throwback on this new record from US Girls. Lots of squelchy synth work, funk guitars, and bass arrangements. This honestly reminds me a bit of Daddy's Home from St. Vincent, in the aesthetics that it's trying to emulate at least. Like, this thing feels like it's coming from the gritty 70s, you know, the pre-Giuliani, the pre-Reconstruction, hey, I'm walking here! Very solid grooves in a lot of places, and it opens strong with only Daedalus and Just Space for Light, but it's also one of those records that's like kind of wonky and inconsistent, if I'm being honest. When the formula works, it does work very well, but there are places where the arrangements can just sound kind of sparse and farty. I'm not sure how to put it. When the album's good, it sounds like a particularly good Carpenter's track, but when it's bad, it sounds like a particularly bad Carpenter's track. This is the weirdest Carpenter's record I think I've ever heard. How about I put it like that? What does work on this record works very well, but I'd say it's a bits and pieces kind of record. Big fans of US Girls will probably like this. It doesn't like wildly disappoint or anything, but I'd say she's definitely put out better records than this, and I would probably be more likely to point you towards some of those. A lot of her late 2010 stuff is a lot better than this. If you needed more of that St. Vincent Daddy's Home vibes in your life, and you just don't want to put the record on for another listen, this will fill that slot pretty comfy for you. Kind of Mossy Manos kind of record for me. Parts of it I dug, parts of it I didn't. It's just kind of okay overall, I guess. Oh, god damn it, I can't monetize that. So this album got a ton of buzz earlier in the year, and to a degree, I do honestly get it. Some very loud, very kinetic melodies, lots of discordant guitars, distorted synth work, and their vocalist has this very distinct, very yelpy and screaming kind of baritone. And when this album goes hard, I admit it does go very, very hard. It honestly reminds me of a lot of other bands that are out here kind of doing the same thing. Maybe it's because I'm just uncultured swine, but I can't really bring up this record without also bringing up a lot of their contemporaries like Black Country New Road and Black Midi. God, at least their name doesn't have black in it. I'd never be able to tell half these bands apart if they did. I mean, it definitely feels like it's going for that kooky, abrasive Whackazade kind of sound, though ironically, I think I like this a lot more than I liked the last few Black Country, Black MIDI records, particularly because of how straightforward it is compared to those guys. This album has much more in terms of identifiable hooks. It feels like there's a lot more solid structure and definable song construction here. That's one thing that's been pushing me away from that particular genre here lately, just how prog rock and kind of up its own ass it's becoming. I'm sorry, it just kind of is. I did find myself enjoying this record though, because there's just more I can sink my teeth into. I also like their darker, more sinister, again, more goth adjacent kind of sound. Like they're trying to evoke a very ominous, a very blackened kind of dark mood. It feels like they have a goal and a purpose in the music behind all the whackazade and all the crazy stuff that's going on. I will admit I don't love this as much as some critics do, but then again, I've always been a little bitch baby when it comes to stuff that's more abrasive and noisy. I don't love it at time of writing, but it is a record I have come back to more than a few times, and I have a sneaky feeling this one could potentially grow on me. Like, this might be one of those I give a rating to now, but let's see how it sits throughout the rest of the year. Another first try here, Karen Jonas is a country artist who's been at it since about 2014, and I have to admit, I was really impressed with what I heard here. She's an alt-country gal who leans a bit more on the mellow side with a fantastic, smoky, pillowy alto singing. She sounds like Sheryl Crow with a bit more flexibility and a bit more twang to her voice. Like seriously, top marks on her singing. Her voice is just absolutely gorgeous. This gal absolutely knows how to put bedroom eyes to music. Like, not freaky sexy, slow burn sexy. She's great at creating a smoldering, earnestly passionate kind of mood. Songs like Paris Breeze and Lay Me Down are absolutely great at that let's kind of vibe. Other tracks like The Breakdown and Elegantly Wasted do cover that more traditional, more standard kind of bumpkin fuck up mood, and she does execute those songs well, Jesus. She can get a bit silly and fun here without it feeling too out of place, but man, the strongest moments on this record are when she lights up the fireplace and slows things down. Not to mention the terrific instrumentation and song composition also help a great deal here. I love the emphasis on clean electric guitars and organs, the lack of more twangy country aesthetics like slide guitars or banjos, the more traditional kind of country elements. There's not a ton of that here, and in that sense it almost makes it feel like a rock record. Again, this is very Sheryl Crow adjacent. I definitely say this is one of my favorite country releases that has come out in the year so far. You know, this is just a great record to put on, you know, after maybe you and your partner, maybe you've had a few too many, maybe the moon is out in the sky just right, maybe you just lay back and push your face against the headboard and just oh, y'all. Oh, another big album of the year contender with this one right here. Again, this is absolutely my fucking jam. More 80s as fuck synth pop, but this one really goes for broke. Huge, bold drum machine beats, big, blary, scorching, overdriven keyboards, bright, colorful, synthetic melodies. It knows exactly what it's trying to do, and it's trying to land on the soundtrack to Rocky IV. And it's great for that. This thing is just an absolute glitter disco, and I loved every minute of it. I can't stop coming back to this damn record. Though admittedly, yeah, they are kind of a one-trick pony. This kind of 80s dance floor techno pop is just kind of what they do. Their last few records also sounded a lot like this, so it's not really a mix-up of their usual formula. But again, I've always said there is nothing wrong with being a one-trick pony if you are really, really good at your trick. And Nuovo Testamento, yeah, they are maybe arguably the best at the one thing that they do. It's shallow and it can be a little derpy in places, but it's a lot of fun and it doesn't overstay its welcome either. It's a very svelte 31 minutes, but every single one of those 31 minutes is an absolute jam. This is actually my first full sit with slowthai, and like, man, this guy is intense, isn't he? He's a hip-hop artist, and you can absolutely tell he's got a very strong sense of rhythm and flow, but his delivery, at least on this record, is much, much more shouty than I was expecting. Man, he is just howling his guts out on this record. You can tell this one was meant to have a much grittier, aggro, almost punk rock kind of edge to it, and I absolutely do hear it in there. You can tell instrumentally the dude was inspired by the likes of other big English alternative punk and even some post-punk acts. I definitely heard traces of like Old Block Party, early Supergrass, Fontaine's DC. Well, of course I heard Fontaine's DC. They are literally on the fucking record. Though if anything, I'd say the savageness of this record may also be one of its biggest drawbacks. This guy is just a big fucking bummer, isn't he? His lyrics about disaffected hopelessness, substance abuse, scraping for light in the absolute darkest of places. I mean, I know that's kind of what you sign up for with a slowthai record, but like, man, sitting through a whole album of this, it's a little much even for me. I did still enjoy my time with it overall. I definitely plan on coming back to this a few more times before the year is out. A slowthai definitely has a lot of raw talent, and I do totally get the appeal. I see why he's hot shit right now, but man, it's a little much. It's such a bummer. I mean, not that it isn't even a justifiable bummer. I mean, fucking Tories, am I right? The only thing I have in my notes for this one is, it's Haken, it's fine. I can stretch that into 2 minutes. So to be more specific, it's a Haken record, and I'd say it's a good Haken record. Come on, Crash, do better. Well, I mean, it's got a kooky sci-fi premise, some damn fine and technically impressive prog rock construction and instrumentation, and Ross Jennings' vocals are as clean and crisp and as enjoyable as ever. As far as more specific nuances go, well, you know what you're getting with a Haken record, and I would say this is indeed more Haken. And you know, Haken aren't even a band that suffers from the problem or anything like that. It's just that, I don't know, I've taken the Haken ride for a few records now, and I kind of know what to expect. I wouldn't say they did that much to mix things up this time around. I'd say maybe they played a little bit more with their time signatures a bit. Things can get a little more chaotic here and there than I've heard on other records. I felt like the guitar noodling was maybe a bit more on the wild and chaotic side. I'd say it leans less on the let's write a kick-ass guitar solo side of prog and more on the let's make a time signature cry side. And overall it was an enjoyable little prog record, but outside of that, I don't really have too much to add to this. It's Haken, and it's another perfectly solid Haken record. If you're into Haken, I'm sure you'll probably like this too. I would just say it's fine for what it is. If you're into prog rock, and particularly that more specifically kind of nerd glasses kind of prog rock, like this is very, very nerdy music. But hey, if that's your jam, more good stuff to have. Worth a listen if that's your thing. A band I've been hearing a lot of buzz about for a while now. Their full length is finally dropped, and I'd say it's a solid little pop-punk adjacent bit of fun. It's very bright and colorful, and the vocal harmonies are very well executed. Edith Victoria is a very talented singer with a lot of range, and she can really hit those big flashy moments when she wants to. I definitely feel like she's the strongest asset of this group. The instrumentation overall, if I'm being honest, could have been stronger. There were plenty of decent hooks and some okay choruses here and there, but there's nothing all that flashy, impressive, or even particularly all that memorable in the construction. I mean, given the kind of light sugar pop punk this is, I don't go into it expecting Van Halen or anything, but honestly, a little more flash or substance to the guitar, bass, or drum work wouldn't have been amiss or anything. That's not to say it's a bad record by any means. It's very solid for what it is. I'm sure the scene babies are probably getting a lot of mileage out of this right now. I personally wouldn't say this is album of the year material or anything, but the band does absolutely show a decent amount of potential, and they seem extremely talented and very driven. I've heard they put on a hell of a live show too, so good for them. Even if this wasn't my favorite album by any means, I would be interested in hearing from them again, and again, I do see the potential in there. As far as this debut goes, I was left a little cold, but I still see a lot of promise in these guys. Ooh, boy, this one... I'm sorry, this one's kind of rough, y'all. Suicide Silence has just had a really tough go of things ever since they lost Mitch Lucker, haven't they? And I was honestly on board with Eddie Hermita at first. Like, the first record they did with him was very, very solid in my opinion. But then they made that self-titled record, play the To Live clip, make a quirky grimace, cut to an abrupt transition. While their last record, Become the Hunter, did everything they could to steer out of that tailspin, it also wasn't necessarily the best record either. It was pretty unmemorable. I don't remember a damn thing from that record, except it wasn't the self-titled. And on this record too, I'd say... man, these guys are really out of ideas, aren't they? The instrumentation overall is fine, I suppose. It's deathcore, and while the mix on this thing absolutely could be better, I've definitely heard worse. The way these guys haven't budged an inch since 2014, except for that one time we don't talk about, that's probably one of my biggest problems with this album overall. It's very bog standard. There is nothing new to report here. It's the same 2014, 2012 style of deathcore. This thing just feels locked in that early 2010s mindset, and it just does not know where to go from here. Which wouldn't be the most damning thing in its own right, but man, Eddie's voice... oh, he's starting to lose it, y'all. Our man just cannot reach those high squeals anymore, can he? And even a lot of his gutturals are missing that old grime and gurgle and savageness and just... It's not the worst deathcore album I've ever heard, and it's not even the worst deathcore album these guys have ever made, for sure. But it just has me wondering, how much longer do y'all intend on keeping this up? It's clear Eddie's running out of steam, and no one else seems to have any original ideas in their head anymore. I'm sorry, this band just sounds like they are way past it. They probably should have hung it up a long time ago. Y'all, this just... not recommended. Even for some of you hardcore deathcore fans out there, just... oh no, this is a pass. U2. I am a fan. I am one of your biggest fans. Stop making me hurt you! Why couldn't you assholes have just released an unplugged record like everyone else who wants to do something like this does? Who the hell is this bloated, meandering monster even for? Normally I wouldn't throw something like this on a Fimi palette because it's not even really a record. It's a handful of songs that they already recorded throughout their career, only they decided to re-record them with the thinnest, clankiest production, the most horribly bland elevator music rearrangements, and a vocal performance that really tells me, Bono, you're starting to lose it too, aren't you, dude? I mean, credit where it's due, it took you a long time to get to this point, but dude... you're sounding pretty rough, my guy. And if this had just been a short little throwaway EP or a short little record, I probably wouldn't even be so down on it. This thing is close to 3 fucking hours long. No one needs 3 hours of this. No one needs 30 minutes of this. You know what this record sounds like? Have you ever tried one of those anti-anxiety apps like Calm or Headspace? And you know how they'll have like rearranged albums or songs by like really popular artists. They'll have them as playlists you can throw on in the background, but those rearranged albums or songs are like stretched out to really long lengths and are made to be much more serene and peaceful and quiet because they're meant to help you come down from anxiety attacks or help you relax enough to where you can actually get to sleep. You know, those kind of things that are made for like medical purposes. That's what this thing is. Only U2 released theirs as a fucking record standalone release. It just baffles me why this exists and who this was made for. Super fans? Y'all, I'm probably one of the biggest U2 fans you will meet on this side of the internet. I love U2. I still defend U2 to this damn day. That How to Get Into U2 episode is gonna happen one of these days. Y'all better brace for that. But like, even I don't want anything to do with this. I also love Metallica, but I'm not running out to buy the Rockabye Baby and bluegrass renditions and light jazz motif versions. That's novelty shit. U2 basically just put out their own novelty record. Again, U2, I love your music. Stop making me do this. Ow, Jesus, God, fuck, turn it off. Holy fucking shit. Who the hell employed that synth tone on this album? Jesus fucking Christ, that's the worst synth I've ever heard in my life. I feel like I'm failing a hearing test. Y'all, not since that last Vector album I reviewed have I encountered an album that caused physical pain. Seriously, this is another one of those albums that triggers my migraines, and it's that fucking dog whistle of a synth tone that's on like 70% of the tracks. Can y'all hear this shit? It can't just be me. I know I'm not crazy. Okay, I don't know that for sure, but my God, this album literally physically hurt me. And Kamelot is usually a band I don't necessarily hate, so like this is, oh my God, Kamelot. If you re-release this album and take out those fucking migraine-inducing synth tones, I will bump this score up. Not by much, because again, it is just a Kamelot record, and it sounds like a lot of the other Kamelot records. Y'all, I will literally bump my score up from this if you make a version of this album that doesn't hurt. Oh, again, Yves Tumor is one of those artists that I really want to like more. I feel like I should like them more, but nothing they've ever released has ever really clicked all that much for me, and I had a lot of the same issues with this record too. I believe they were shooting to make a more rock-centric record, something with a bit more swagger and confidence. And you know, even if this isn't my particular cup of tea, I can't deny that I feel like they did achieve that to a certain degree. I can't deny their talent behind hook construction, and they do have a gorgeous and beautiful singing voice. But again, like with Ava Max, I don't know, most of their music just slides right out of my brain the minute I listen to it, and I honestly tried. I do feel like they did a decent job of stepping up their game, but like, I don't know, it's all still very kind of meandering, kind of waxy, just kind of listless and limp. I don't know, this record shifts things up a notch, but it's more like a shift from first gear to second gear. I don't know, this thing still felt like kind of a snoozer to me. I don't know, it just doesn't click for me. Maybe it's another one of those things I just don't get. And hey, if it's your vibe, I ain't here to come down on you for it. You know, I've been listening to Yves Tumor for at least 5 years now, trying to get it, and I still just don't. I don't know, if it's your thing, enjoy. I definitely feel like it's probably not mine. Have fun with it though. You know, this album produces an interesting question. What does a gimmick band do when they, in this case, literally outgrow their gimmick? For Babymetal, that appears to be just become a super solid J-rock and J-metal act and just kind of make it work. And for the most part, it does. The Kami band, whoever the hell they are this time, are banging out some very wicked hooks and riffs, very ferocious guitar work and soloing here, very pronounced and spacey synth work, kind of building off of that sci-fi theme that their last record had. I never actually reviewed that one. I think John from ARTV did. Watch his video if you want to know how that record is, I guess. And Su-metal and Moe-metal have definitely become very proficient singers in their own right. It does work well for what it is. It's nice that the music still bangs, and it's still a lot of fun, despite the more kawaii elements no longer being that much of a thing. But y'all, let's be real here. It would have gotten super cringy if they had tried to hang on to that. I mean, these gals are in their 20s now. Sue is 25 years old as of now. Yeah, y'all, Doki Doki Morning was a long-ass time ago. We are all fucking old. But, you know, I understand why they did what they did in that particular sense of things. Let these gals grow up, for God's sake, you know? Though I would say my biggest overall criticism is that they are still trying to write a lot of songs in English, particularly for this album. There's probably the most English I've ever heard on any Babymetal album. God bless them, but they still don't really have it nailed down yet. Some of the lyrics sound very kish. They sound very lost in translation. Maya in particular just has this sort of feel behind it. It's just screaming, please use this in an anime Netflix. But overall, it's not a bad record, and it's cool to see Babymetal find a course that allows them to stay interesting and relevant without, you know, having to constantly put on the cutesy effect. You know, it's nice to see some legit growth here. And even if it's not my favorite outing by them by any means, still solid fun, still a good time, and there's still a lot of reasons to, you know, throw up the foxes. Yeah, this is another one of those where I had a full script written and ready to go, but other shit got in the way and I didn't have time to shoot it. Y'all, we had to scare the hoes. But this album's had a gargantuan amount of hype behind it. Given the first single that they dropped, Love from the Other Side, it's like the best fucking song they've released in over a fucking decade. Yeah, that knocked me off my feet, and you want to know something? Even to my surprise, I really fucking like this record. This is the single most fun I've had with a Fall Out Boy record since I was in my fucking 20s, and y'all, believe me, that was a long time ago. They said their intention with this one was to make a record that sounded like it was following up directly from Folie à Deux before their first hiatus came around. And while I appreciate them listening to what the fans wanted to hear, wow, that is an absolutely damning indictment of the last decade's worth of work you've put out. But no, y'all, I honestly think this is the best Fall Out Boy record we've gotten in at least 10 years. Although I guess I'm kind of in the minority with that opinion. I've heard a lot of feeling comments about this record, and you know, I won't even say a lot of those misgivings are misguided or anything. No, I kind of get where y'all are coming from on this. Most of the complaints I hear are about the overall mix of the record, and you know, I don't even disagree with y'all on that. They tend to lean very heavy on the strings, on the orchestral arrangements, a lot on the heavy and opulent side of things. In some tracks, it absolutely fucking rips, but in a lot of others, it just doesn't make much sense. Particularly the interlude track with Ethan Goddamn Hawke. Who let him in here? And even though there are moments on this album I absolutely love, I do gotta admit, I only really love about 2/3 of this record. The interlude tracks and the 2 tracks that rest between them, definitely kind of a dead zone. That area in the middle of the record is where a lot of the production elements they were shooting for don't work. Some of the construction is a bit clumsy. There aren't really great choruses behind a lot of those tracks. And in addition to that saggy middle portion, this album also does feel like it has no fucking idea what it wants to be. On the moments where their experimentation does pay off, ooh, I'd say it pays off really, really well. Love from the Other Side, again, fucking banger of an opening track. I love the bass work and dance floor piano on Hold Me Like a Grudge. I love how pretty and moody and tragic Fake Out is, with Patrick Stump just making a huge vocal flex. He sings his guts out on that track, and I love it. I loved the 80s action movie soundtrack goofs of the Kintsugi Kid and the 70s disco worship of What a Time to Be Alive. Like, y'all, to me, some of this is the best stuff Fall Out Boy has done in years, and it's nice to see them experimenting with sounds and styles that actually fucking pay off, or at the very least sound like a decent fit for them. I do feel like the schizophrenic nature of the record is definitely a drawback, and man, that saggy part in the middle does kill some of the intensity. Again, I get where folks are coming from, and even I wouldn't say this is a perfect record. This isn't getting aces from me or anything, but y'all, remember the last time I had to review this band? Fall Out Boy? Please break up. Well, this record, after hearing it, it made me glad that they didn't. Because obviously, they still have talent. They still have some very cool ideas. They still have some very nice tricks up their sleeves. And again, I am so glad to just hear this band making good music again, genuinely good music again. I'm willing to give credit where it's due. And I just had a lot of fun with this. It's worth checking out. And that's the Fimi for Q1 of 2023. It's good to be back in it. I want to give a special shout out to our $5 and above patrons over on the Patreon. Alpha Rain, David Perez, Dylan Rare Hunter, Foxy Lover 92, John T. Bowen, Constructivist, let me know if I'm mispronouncing that by the way, Nick Barrows Johnson, Richard Talbot, Yoshitaki, Artemi Musha, Alex Sobolou, Chris Doman, Cordelia of the Seas, David Prince, Errol Henderson, Freddie Thomas, Gina at Love B. Jones, Jared Stone, Jason Semler, Joseph D., Cole, Kuzronk, Lainey Wilson, Lilith Estelle, Mars Hunter, Michael K., Rocked, Rowan Cookie, Sarah Aubin, Stephanie Von Wagner, Ted Z, Warped Kia, Zella, Akshay W, Stephen Hafner, Mark Grondin, and Dominic Noble. Thanks again for watching, y'all. Stay tuned for more shenanigans in the near future. My name is Crash Thompson, and I will see ya when I see ya.